Good evening, everybody in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an online webinar, Evening of Solutions for a New Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. Our purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and sovereignty by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship with Canada. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do this without your help. If this is your first time watching, welcome, and I hope you find this information engaging and wanting to find out more. And if you're a regular APP webinar viewer, thank you again for your support. We couldn't do this without you. APP is membership driven with a goal of 1 million plus members to help steer the political process. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40. And you can find out more at albertaprosperityproject.com. And we also have APP merchandise available at albertaprosperitystore.com, which is a new setup. Tonight's webinar is entitled Bill C-11, Just Transition and So Much More, with our guest, Kris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. This is a live webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions and make comments throughout this presentation. Just put 3 question marks before your question, so it'll be flagged and we can quickly view the questions. Just so you know, I am totally running this show all by myself today. We usually have somebody working in the back. She is out on vacation in Cuba, and good for her. I wish I was with her. So if something screws up, don't worry about it. It's just totally my fault. So what I'd like to do is bring Kris on right now. There you are. Hello, Kris. How are you?
Fabulous. Thanks for having us.
Excellent. So just a little bit of an intro for Kris. She is from the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, and she was born in a small town in British Columbia, and she's been employed and taxed since she was 12 years old, working in horse stables, fast food joints, gas stations before attending journalism school at BCIT. And then the rest of her resume is just a whole bunch of, she's worked in radio, she's a producer, reporter. You have a lot of knowledge in that brain of yours. So we're hoping that we can actually tap into some of it tonight and talk about, again, the big thing for us anyways, is Bill C-11. Did you want to maybe just give us a quick rundown on what this bill is and why everyone in Canada should be really concerned about it?
Thanks so much, and hello to all of your viewers and all of your members. It's great to be here to share the knowledge. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, for folks who don't know, we've been around since 1990, since before the internet was a thing. Our goal is for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government, and that's one of the main reasons why I'm speaking with you folks here tonight. Awesome. We are non-partisan, but we try to pressure all parties and politicians to do what our supporters want, and we've got more than 235,000 supporters across Canada now. Wow. So yeah, we try to focus on that stuff. So this is why we're into C-11. Yeah. C-11 is a big government censorship bill. Okay. And if they succeed in doing this, it's going to be a lot tougher for organizations like the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and groups like Alberta Prosperity to hold the government to account. Yeah. Right? Because if you can't speak up, if you can't express yourself, who's going to hear you? Right?
Exactly.
So the C-11 in a nutshell was initiated in the House of Commons. It is a House of Commons bill put forward by the Trudeau government. Mm-hmm. And to take it from their side of things, nothing to see here, folks, all they're trying to do is promote Canadian content. Mm-hmm. And that is why it is put forward through Canadian Heritage and through the CRTC.
Okay.
But the bad part of this is, of course, there's always the other side. What they're going to do is that they're going to basically downgrade or upgrade whatever content they see fit as being Canadian. Okay. So if you and I, say, are having a conversation that's recorded and then on YouTube, it could then be up to some bureaucrat sitting in office in Gatineau working for the CRTC to decide if we're Canadian content enough. And you know, there's no politics involved there, right? Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. So this is the problem. So that's just on the surface of it. One, your algorithm's going to get all messed up. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to see the shows you want to see on online platforms. So video, audio, anything that is a sharing service. That's major. Then, if you add the risk of, there's another bill that they don't yet have a number for yet, but it's often referred to as the online harms bill. They tried floating this last time, that last election.
Okay.
And they tried saying, oh, well, we're only going to go after things that are harmful, online expression and talk that is harmful. Well, folks, we already have the criminal code. If we're purporting horrible things like abusing children, God forbid, or terrorism or something, that's in the criminal code.
Yeah.
That this is Canadian heritage that they're calling harmful. So if you start doing a thought process, start imagining what the government likes to call disinformation, right? Or misinformation.
Yeah.
They're taking issue with us even calling the carbon tax a carbon tax. They're calling that misinformation.
Yeah.
So then if it's going to be combined with C-11 so that they get to decide, a bureaucrat in the federal government, the state gets to decide what you see, hear, share, and think on the internet.
Yeah.
Well, that's major. Like, this is a serious threat, both as a freedom-loving person and as a former longtime journalist. Super dangerous. So I really wanted to reach out to everyone watching. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everybody. They need to call their member of parliament and email them as well and say, get rid of C-11. Right now, it's at the Senate.
Yeah.
And it's gone through one round of hearings in the Senate and committee, and now it's back in the Senate chamber itself. There you go. Perfect. Yeah. So you can, I must say this website's very good. So this is your official website of the federal government. You see all the chamber business. If you see there over on the right where it says Senate, we're at first reading.
Yep.
And some of you folks might have seen the footage of a very well-known writer who was standing up in the Senate. He's a senator himself. I would describe him as a left of center gentleman saying, hey, we can't have this. We cannot have the state deciding what is and is not Canadian and free expression. Yeah. And even Margaret Atwood has come out saying, guys, we can't have the right? We can't have the government deciding this.
Yeah.
And just to give you a silly, more benign example of what we've dealt with at the CRTC before, defining what's Canadian content. Well, number one, this isn't benign, but it's one of the major reasons why Sun News Network was shut down. And I was there for all 4 years. They decided we just didn't, meet all their little box ticks and we weren't able to get carriage. So it was decided by the CRTC that we wouldn't, exist ostensibly. Wow. And in the sillier way, anybody who's worked in radio knows what it's like trying to get Canadian content rules on the air.
Yeah.
There were times, Carrie, where Bryan Adams wasn't Canadian content, right? Like because and so being a musician myself and having gone through all that and even with the jukeboxes and stuff, licensing music through that, I'm well aware of what they consider to be Canadian or not. Like, even though you've got Bryan Adams, Canadian as Canadian can possibly be, if it's recorded in a studio in the UK and then it's distributed and there's songwriters in the US, they determine through some mathematical formula that it's not going to be enough Canadian content. And I'm sure that's basically what they're going to end up saying about anything going forward. Like, even though it may actually be done in a studio in Toronto, they may call it out that there's just not enough Canadian content in there. Yeah. And they might, hey, you made eye contact with an American once last fall. Yeah. So therefore you're not Canadian content. Yeah. And when you're dealing with music, it's frustrating enough.
Yeah.
You're dealing, having to play, all respect to Anne Murray. If you have to play Snowbird 3 times an hour, that's one thing. If you can't have a conversation anymore or share information that the government doesn't like, the carbon tax is impoverishing people, or inflation is caused by deficit spending, or, any of those things, the gun grab is wrong, all sorts of things that we would oppose, defund the media, defund the CBC. Well, guess what? If they get to downvote that and make it go away, we're going to be in some serious trouble. And so that's why I'd like to sound the alarm. I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys have lots of time tonight for some stories. So,
oh, for sure.
When I was up on Parliament Hill, I was working there on Parliament Hill when September 11th happened.
Okay.
And then a few years later, folks might remember the gearing up to the war in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And back then, the big opposition marches and all the protests and stuff that were being held against participating in that conflict, depending on where you're landing on this issue.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the right to protest. A lot of that planning was being done online. So people were sharing posters with each other and meetup times, and it was all public.
Yeah.
This wasn't direct messaging or anything back then. It was all open bulletin boards and videos and that stuff.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they had massive protests across Canada.
Yeah.
A big one in Ottawa. And then a few days later, then Prime Minister Jean Chrétien stood up in the House and said, you know what? We're going to sit this one out. Thanks, but no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the government or the state had decided, you know what? We don't really want folks protesting this. We don't really want to get a lot of international attention here. It may be for whatever reason. Yeah. Let's downvote this so nobody sees it. See? Yeah. Like, this is where our friends on the left, as Ronald Reagan would have said, need to put the thought process on and imagine if their guy's not in, imagine living under that situation. And which is why the state has no business deciding what free people say online, as long as it's within the realm of the criminal code. Yeah.
Now, my understanding, of course, even we're broadcasting this on, actually, I have to take a look. Obviously, Facebook, we're broadcasting on a couple of things on Facebook. I believe we're doing Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Rumble. So obviously with say YouTube, I know they're pretty restrictive and they could shut this stream down or at least maybe have it go through live and then remove it. The other ones I'm not so sure about. It kind of just depends. But with government basically sticking their nose in this now, they could come back later on, or even just as we're doing this right now, and say, no, we want this shut down for various reasons. Actually, they probably don't even have to give any reasons because they're the government.
They are the government. And they would then put the onus on the platform. Yeah. And then they'd have to wear it. And show me the platform that wants to deal with a G7 country's government breathing down its neck. Yeah. And deciding, this just wouldn't be worth it for them, right? Which is why it was interesting to see so many different sharing platforms. Yeah. If I recall correctly, even things like, forgive me if it's incorrect, but things like Pinterest and Etsy, more like Tootsie Poo ones, were out against this too. And Facebook and the big ones were all saying, you know what, we can't police this.
No, I agree.
And so this is where it's a big head scratcher as to why they want to get their nose in here. And just imagine anybody who's been in broadcasting, like traditional broadcasting, like CTV or Global. Imagine having an even stronger Broadcast Standards Council and an even stronger CRTC like clamp on you, so you can't really wiggle either way. That would be then on your internet expression. Yeah. So, folks, we can't go this route, and it doesn't matter, if you think you're left, right, or a space alien. We need to have free expression.
Don't radio and TV stations now have to have some little blurb at some point in the year? I'm not even sure how it works, but they basically say, we abide by the CRTC, blah, blah, blah. And so would we have to do that same sort of thing?
Great question. So I've been in radio and I've been in TV, and I remember hearing those and having the spots recorded. And it's like, we are a member of the Broadcast Standards Council. If you have a complaint, please contact.
That's right. Exactly.
It's like that. Sharing platforms, or maybe you'd have to do a preamble at the start of every show. Wow. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Like, you shouldn't have to do any of this stuff. No. And this is why it really needs to be shut down. And I really hope that its crypticness hasn't been lost on people, and more folks need to speak up against it. Yeah.
So I also had read recently that CBC was looking at going all digital, and maybe I'm a taxpayer, and I'm assuming that in theory, if it's taxpayer funded, I should be able to receive that signal, whether it's radio or TV. And of course, now I'm kind of trapped in for here in Alberta, I'm trapped in the Shaw web, where I can only get any stations on my TV through cable, through Shaw. And of course, other people have TELUS, or maybe they've got Bell, or whatever your provider is. But gone are the days that I'd be able to just buy a TV and turn it on and get free channels. Because now it seems that's right. Yeah, I can't do over the air. Nope. So if what's happening with CBC? Are they in that same sort of scenario? And again, we're paying money for it. This should be free broadcasting, or at least, we've paid for it anyways.
Yeah. So this is something that they're planning on doing. It's not happening tomorrow.
Okay.
It's something that their CEO, Catherine Tate, said that they're going to work towards going all digital.
Yeah.
Basically, what that means is, you would have to have it plugged into, fiber op or however it is that you get your TV signal, what we would call TV nowadays.
Yeah.
But for those of us Gen X or older, gone are the days then of broadcasting over the air. You can't just plug in bunny ears to the back of your TV and adjust the tinfoil and make it tune in.
Yeah.
That's been the case for, quite a while. And what she's talking about now is going full digital. Now, if I'm being cynical, I personally think that's a bit of a distraction. Not very many people care about how the signal gets into their TV or not. What we care about is the fact that we blow $1.2 billion on that corporation per year. And they have next to no accountability, and very few people are watching them. They, in their supper hour newscast, so their 6 p.m. newscast across 27 TV stations, they have 314,000 people watching that. Cumulatively. That means that less than 1% of Canadians are watching their supper hour news on the CBC local. Like, man, for what we pay for the CBC, $1.2 billion, you could hire around 13,000 new nurses.
Wow.
It's staggering. And full disclosure, I did work inside that building for about 6 weeks.
The CBC building? In
the CBC building in Ottawa, just so folks know. So I do kind of know what the inside of that beast looks like. And for the rest of it, I was on the outside. I worked at CTV, I worked at Sun. And so they have 143 directors at CBC. 143.
Yeah.
They all make around 130,000 a year.
Wow.
This is it is the opposite of normal. Like, private media does not have that.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So the CBC it's well past time for it to go. It's well outgrown its mandate. From the 1930s, it was supposed to broadcast the weather to farmers and Hockey Night in Canada and a little bit of radio drama to compete with CBS New York. We're way past that. So for folks who love it, and there are, I guess, a few people who do like the CBC, feel free. Like, you can subscribe to it. Start a GoFundMe, like, pay for it. But taxpayers should not be on the hook for CBC.
No, I agree. And haven't they had this same sort of discussion in the UK about BBC 1, 2, 3? And do you know that?
Yeah, their BBC is a little different. So some of it is taxpayer, and then some of it is they've got like a special when you buy a television or a television box. It may be both or either one. They pay a fee to the BBC, but it's also attached to the hardware. It's not only attached to taxpayers, it's attached to the physical owning of a screen and the tuning in of said station. Again, I know there's a few taxpayers organizations over in the UK that are trying to defund the Beeb, but very similar. And, up to folks if they like programming or not. I used to watch some old BBC programs back in the 80s. But again, we have a lot of options for entertainment now. And if people want to pay for it and they like that sort of, Murdoch mystery, PBS sort of thing, like, by all means, like, folks can
I'm also an actor, and I haven't actually worked lately just because of various things. But I do recognize that, CBC, with the funding from us, really, from the taxpayer, that does go towards programming, and whether or not you call it quality programming, I don't know. I honestly don't really watch the Murdoch mystery, so I have no idea. However, I have watched This Hour Has 22 Minutes, and but that sort of stuff, and they wouldn't be able to produce these shows unless this money was coming from the arts grants or whatever they're called. So even though I do support getting rid of the CBC because I think it's media and the news is utter trash, I would be a bit concerned about not having that art grant for projects. Do you want to maybe comment on that?
Yeah, it's funny
Yeah.
you mentioned that because I just finished writing this
Okay.
piece
Yeah.
for our Taxpayer magazine.
Yeah.
You're in luck.
Oh,
If you want the government to continue to pay artists, the Canada Council for the Arts, they take about $500 million from us a year.
okay.
This is not even touching CBC's funding.
Wow.
This is separate.
500 million.
Yes, I was
Wow.
shocked too.
Wow.
And so that is for everything from, the really goofy statues you see in Montreal to paying for a jazz band to tour Central America who happens to hail from Winnipeg.
Wow.
Like, that money comes from other pots. There is so much money going to the arts from the federal taxpayer, of which we all are, that doesn't even go through the CBC funnel. And we're not even talking about that. So just CBC funding is $1.2 billion. Yeah. All the rest is completely separate line items on the budget.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I know. It's pretty staggering. And for folks, I can hear some folks right now, maybe it's in my head of, what about the really critical things like providing Indigenous language services?
Yeah, yeah.
Fair enough, man. I hear you. Yeah. But unfortunately, the CBC spent more on their pay raises and bonuses for management and pay than they did on First Nations language programming.
And what just happened with the CBC? The somebody that stepped down like 5 years ago ended up getting their back pay.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Does it? Okay.
It happens a lot within a lot of federal departments.
Yeah.
But the pay at the CBC is pretty eye-watering. Catherine Tate, again, the CEO, who is, I think she must be finished by now. Yeah. She was doing a little tour of Canada, but only in the CBC studios, and none of us knew when or where she was going to be. It was like that, man.
Just like when Trudeau happens to just show up in Chilliwack one day. Yeah, same idea. Yeah, yeah.
Poof, there he is. It's just like that bubble in The Wizard of Oz, and she floats it, and there she is, with the good witch Glinda. But yeah, Catherine Tate, she makes around $480,000 a year. And she's entitled to, I think it's a 26% pay bonus.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's not including like hospitality and travel and whatnot. So,
and that's one person.
One
single person
is paid $500,000 a year.
Yeah,
it's pretty gross, and we have to keep in mind too how. Folks can try to talk themselves into, we need it and it's cultural. Again, number one, very few people are watching. Yeah. Number two, those who really love listening to As It Happens on CBC Radio, folks just pay $5 a month. Okay. Yeah. Just settle it out.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Three, it's costing an eye-watering amount of money for all of this middle management, and they're really not getting the job done. And four, most working people have just been put through hell for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, man, but most of us have not gotten pay hikes and huge bonuses and pats on the back and whatnot. Yeah. During the pandemic, they've got all these bonuses. In fact, their number of people at the CBC making more than $100,000 a year has more than doubled since Trudeau took over in 2015. I'll say that again. Sunshine List. People making more than $100,000 a year. That number has doubled at the CBC since Trudeau took over.
Wow. Yeah. And that's all across Canada. Like whether or not you're working in Victoria all the way to St. John.
Yep. Doesn't matter if you're at the Mother Corp in Toronto or if you're up at St. John's or whatever. But it's an awful lot. Most of the folks I imagine making over 100K, I would guess would be in the Quebec-Windsor corridor area.
So the people working at CBC in Alberta probably don't want us talking about them, but really, I mean, it comes down to, I agree. Like a lot of this stuff can probably go away with if you're doing your own private funding, right? Like, I mean, if you want to watch Netflix, you're paying for Netflix. If you want to watch Disney Plus, you're paying for Disney Plus. Yeah. Why couldn't we do that for CBC and CBC Gem, I think is what they call it online. Yeah.
Oh, and they've got CBC Music, and they've got all sorts of little spin-off-y things that they have. And again, they can do subscription, they can do GoFundMe, they can do advertising.
Yeah.
Advertise products that people want to purchase with money. Like there's all sorts of ways of doing it. You
Yeah.
know, the Taxpayers Federation, we take donations from people of their free will.
Yeah.
We don't take money from the government. We don't even give you a tax receipt.
Yeah.
We're not a charity. We don't want to incur cost. So you know, pay your own.
Yeah, let's actually talk about what does the Canadian Taxpayer Federation do, because I'm sure there are people that are interested in that too.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So for folks, generally speaking, for folks who've never seen us before, we're the ones who hand out the golden pig statues to politicians at an awards ceremony every year for wasting your money in spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
We're the ones that will do the stunts like dressing up as something that kind of looks like the traditional Italian puppet Pinocchio.
Yeah.
And chase a politician down the street because they fibbed and didn't tell the truth. We're also the ones that'll do really serious report to committee before the budget and give you a 70-page pre-budget report at the federal level. And so we're the ones that are always trying to hold the government to account, whether it's federal or provincial. We try to do our part with the municipal and city, but there's an awful lot of them across Canada. So we basically rely on whistleblowers there. Yeah. So we want government, we want low taxes, less waste, and accountable government. And so that means things like recall legislation.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It means things like here in Alberta, the Taxpayer Protection Act. Okay. That's one of the reasons why we don't have a PST in Alberta, because the politicians would have to hold and win a referendum from the people if they wanted to impose a sales tax. Yeah. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is a huge reason why we have the Taxpayer Protection Act. We also do pledge signings. Folks might remember that really vividly. So that's where we'll come up with something like, you know, if I become prime minister or as leader of the Conservative Party, for example, will never impose a carbon tax.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And you sign. And so we did one before the UCP leadership vote with all of the candidates save one. And we will not put through a PST or raise taxes if I'm premier. Okay. So we did that just there in August before the vote. Yeah. So we do that. It's basically grassroots, citizen-based accountability watchdogs of government.
Yeah. How binding would that be if our premier happened to just go and say, no, you know what? After looking at the books, that's terrible expression. Terrible. Can we actually, like, would she be able to actually just go ahead and do a PST, or would you guys be coming back and calling her out, or like?
Oh, we'd be calling her out. Yeah. Oh, sure. So for folks who might remember, Aaron O'Toole, the previous leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, he signed our pledge saying, you know, Scout's honor, I will not put through a carbon tax, and I blah, 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 blah. Well, unfortunately, he changed his mind for whatever reason. Yeah. I think they got kind of hooked on focus groups there for a bit and decided, oh, well, it's going to be called a fee or a price and it's not a tax and all this stuff, right? Yeah. I don't know how many opinion editorials we put through major national newspapers, and we just sent thousands of emails to all of the Conservative MPs over and over in waves. We timed it for their caucus meetings on Wednesday mornings, so their phones would be blowing up. So there's a lot of ways of holding people accountable, both serious, like I just described, like calling people out on you did not tell the truth, like you need to answer for this right now, to just frankly embarrassing them. So we literally have a Pinocchio costume, and we will chase you around with the camera. Like, that's hey, awesome. Man, you got don't tell our supporters that you're not going to do something and then you're trying to do it. So we don't care who it is, and we don't care what party it is. We don't care what candidate it is. If you sign that pledge, which is very clear, and nobody's forced to do it. That's the other thing. If they choose not to sign a pledge, I don't chase them down a hallway or chew their leg off. Right? It's up to people to decide whether or not they want to sign something. But we will hold them accountable if they do something.
That's true. So you know, we're the other part that we're supposed to be talking about is just transition. And what I wanted to basically say was something along the lines of, well, if we decide to get rid of the CBC and we end up doing our own broadcasting, maybe we can take all these oil field workers and everybody else that needs to be just transitioned and transition them in that way.
Can you imagine?
But no, I can't imagine.
That would be something to watch, man. Live from the truck. Yeah, I would actually watch that.
Oh yeah. Well, what do they call it? The big rigs, I don't know, the Arctic trucking and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean those shows are rather interesting too, right?
Oh, one of my favorite shows.
Icefield Trucker. Yeah.
No, it's actually shot like, I'm home here in Hope in British Columbia.
Yeah.
Sudden passing in the family, but it's right up the canyon and right up the Coquihalla. I can basically see it from this window. Highway Through Hell and Jamie Davis and all those guys. It's amazing what these folks can do. But yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
Yeah. So well, let's get right into what exactly is just transition, because I mean, from what, well, I'll let you explain it anyways, because I've got some other notes here and we'll follow up after this. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So just transition is the official name of the official plan of the federal Trudeau government to just transition Canada away from oil and gas, also known as fossil fuels, depending on what term you want to use. This is all tied into a myriad international agreements that various governments and agencies have signed on to in order to get to net zero, to reduce our carbon emissions, etc. Now, it's been vague what's been inside of their just transition plan up until recently. So an independent journalism website called Blacklock's Reporter, I highly recommend taking a look at them. Holly Doan, she used to be a bureau chief over in Asia for many years on TV. She knows her stuff. Tom Korski, longtime journalist in the Parliamentary Press Gallery, also knows his stuff. They focus on freedom of information requests, committee, all that really good, meaty stuff up on Parliament Hill. They got their hands on a memo. This official memo was between the department, so the unelected bureaucrats, the permanent government within a department, and Mr. Wilkinson, Minister Wilkinson, the Minister of Natural Resources. It was around 80 pages long. Now, the purpose of this memo, ostensibly, was to find out what possible labor impacts the just transition plan might have. Now, we went through it like hungry dogs. We started one end and somebody started at the back end, and we worked our way through to the middle. And in a nutshell, this is the data they have in there. They said it would have a disproportionate effect / uneven impact, depending what terminology you want to use, on energy, trucking, farming, construction, and manufacturing.
Wow.
Yeah. So the industries and people who keep us warm, build our houses, grow our food, make all of the stuff we use, and deliver all of said things.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal. These are not, laptop bureaucrats that they're just transitioning out. So if you add up all of the workers that are within those industries, as this memo does. So these are the numbers attached to these words in the memo. You can take a look. It's on our website. It's 2.7 million workers. Again, federally, it's 2.7 million workers. If you add up all of the salaries, these are just the average StatsCan salaries, man. So we're not talking specialization and, overtime pay. It's about $219 billion per year worth of salary.
Wow.
So so understandably so, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said, I don't think so. Not happening, bub. I believe Premier Scott Moe said something very similar. A lot of folks in the West were like, oh, hold on there. Just you wait a minute. We can't be just transitioning ourselves into darkness and coldness and not eating food. That's when Ottawa went into Ottawa mode, as I call it. And they said, oh, no. You've all misunderstood. Nothing to see here. The memo simply describes the totality of all of these positions in all of these industries, not necessarily the ones that we are going to obliterate off the face of the planet, retrain at taxpayers' expense, subsidize until it finally falters, you name it. Okay, I don't know if I believe that, but even if you were, we can't afford a fraction of this.
Yeah. No.
Like, we have negative money. We are
Yeah.
more than $1 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
So there's no like any of this that we can afford. And to give you an example, I think it's a smoking gun within this memo. They like to, as with all of these international fancy agreements, it's just like high school. They all like mentioning what their friends are doing. Like, this is what so-and-so country's doing. Here's what so-and-so is. Scotland. They're all about Scotland talking in this memo. Scotland. What are they doing? So Scotland, in this memo they reference, their version is called the Just New Deal.
Yeah.
And yes, all of the countries, for some reason, are putting the just prefix in their plan. Whatever. Yeah. Theirs is called the Just New Deal. Well, adjusted for Canadian population, Scotland's spending like a crazy amount of money. I think it's something like $30 billion on their Just New Deal.
Wow.
Like, it is a ton of dough. And so this is where we're really trying to sound the alarm and say there's a lot more answers here that we need. And we can't just phase things out. And keep in mind where this is coming from. Yeah. This is coming from the Trudeau government, who has already said that they want to phase out the oil sands. It's the same government that has put through the No More Pipelines law, same government that has done the West Coast tanker ban, same government that, put so many barriers and goalposts in front of Energy East that have finally died, didn't lift a finger with Keystone, and they dragged their feet on Kinder Morgan so long that company threw its hands up in the air, and now taxpayers are on the hook for the thing, and it's called the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So their rap sheet ain't so good when it comes to this stuff.
No. Is there anything that we can do? I mean, we can phone our MPs and do all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the issue with the whole just transition is you're taking these people, the workers that have gone to school, they've taken a trade, they've gone up, they're working, they're contributing for us to be able to live. Mm-hmm. And now the government is saying, no, you know what? We're gonna make you do something else.
Well, number one, that's just unfair to do that to a worker. So all of my family, including my brother who just passed, they're tradesmen, right? I grew up around trucking, all that stuff. I get it. One, unfair to just tell that to a worker, no matter what. Two, taxpayers can't afford to retrain these folks.
Absolutely not.
We can't afford to artificially create an industry that is not sustainable yet. And so, hey, if tomorrow we discover dilithium crystals and we can run all of our stuff off of it, literally power to you. Like, that's great, man. But you can't artificially just dump taxpayers' money onto something and hope that it grows. Yeah. So this is just not going to work, both from like a fairness perspective, but from the taxpayers' perspective, like, we just don't have the money and it's not going to work. And so this is why I actually think not only make sure you email and phone your MP, but make sure you contact your premier, okay, especially here in Alberta, and say, keep on this. Like, you're saying the right thing if you agree, like if you're opposed to just transition. And so that way premiers have more of a red phone to the PMO. They can exert more pressure than just one MP can. But here's an insider trick. So if you're talking to a politician, number one, make your phone call or your email on Tuesday or like late Tuesday, because it's Wednesday morning that the federal MPs are meeting. Oh, yes. So they're fresh on their morning. They're supposed to have their phones down. They'll have their head full of constituency issues. Make sure your issue is top of mind for them. Okay. One, so timing. Do it Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. Two, don't just say, I'm super mad and you need to do something about this. I would gently recommend saying something like, you know what? If you don't take a really strong vocal stand that I can see in here against just transition, I'm not going to vote for you. And I'm going to get together a group of my friends and neighbors in your riding. And I'm going to go after your constituency association. And I'm going to door knock against you in the next election. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That gets their attention real fast. Because then it might be their job that's just transitioned out of existence. That's right.
No, that's amazing. That's exactly what we should all be doing this. So if anybody's watching this, don't forget to share, but also do that getting a hold of your MP or of your MP and telling them you're going to take a stand on this. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I do know that Trudeau had just appointed a new associate minister. Basically, it's called what's she called now? I actually wrote it down. It's a really weird thing. Like she's the minister of low carbon or something like that. Like it's
I didn't even see that.
What are they coming up with these new positions? Well, I guess they're transitioning their ministers into something else.
So this gets back to language, politics of the English language. If anybody has not read that brilliant essay by George Orwell, I strongly recommend it. It's a very quick read and it's essential. And this again gets back to accountability. Okay. And so this is why I think it's important to focus on that, because you can't hold governments to account if nobody knows what you're saying.
Yeah.
And this, frankly, is why politicians use weasel words like carbon price or carbon fee. Because we think you're too stupid to know that it means a tax.
Yeah.
So, and that only infuriates people. Whenever I'm encouraging an MP on, what to say, right? Because I have some friends who work in politics. I'll be like, tell the truth.
Yeah.
Just say so.
Yeah.
Just say so. You'll win some and you'll lose some, but you'll get people, they'll come to your side because you're saying what you think.
Yeah.
Now they can decide whether they disagree with you or not, but at least you're being forthright and clear.
Yeah.
And so, this is why they'll often change labels. I forget which one that was so funny. Didn't they have a minister of like middle class prosperity, and she couldn't define what middle class was? Like,
totally sounds legit. Yeah.
Right. And so they'll come up with these different labels because another one will fall out of favor in use.
Yeah.
And so they'll try to call things like carbon fee, carbon price, saving the planet and Mother Earth, donation box.
Yeah.
Rather than it's a carbon tax.
Yeah.
It's a carbon tax.
Yeah.
Now you can be a huge booster of the carbon tax and just love it, but at least call it what it is.
Yeah.
And when I was on a debate with a really key liberal strategist who helped write the carbon tax legislation, he's not an MP, he's one of the staffer types.
Yeah.
He called it a carbon tax, and he actually said it's meant to punish the poor behavior of using fossil fuels.
Wow.
It is a punishment.
Yeah.
So, but what's really frustrating and unfair, sorry, I don't know if you want to just transition to the carbon tax.
Absolutely. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, that works.
So the carbon tax is one of our biggest fights at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm from British Columbia originally. British Columbia has had the highest carbon taxes in all of North America since 2008. And I said taxes for a reason. We have 2 carbon taxes in British Columbia. That's why when you are driving across the border from Alberta to BC, like Lethbridge into Cranbrook, like I just did, bam, you're suddenly hit with higher fuel costs. Why is that?
Yeah.
Taxes. So the first carbon tax is around 13 or 14 cents a liter here in British Columbia. It's the mandatory minimum carbon tax. And the second carbon tax is 17 cents a liter on average, gasoline. It's even more for diesel. It's 19 cents a liter for diesel.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a huge difference.
And isn't that going up again like April 1st?
Correct. So right now, our federal mandatory minimum carbon tax is $50 per ton as of this date, February 22nd. It is going up on April 1st to $65 a ton. So what that means in normal people talk is that it's going up to 14 cents a liter gasoline. Right now it's about 10.
Yeah.
It's going up to 14 cents a liter for gasoline and 17 cents a liter for diesel across Canada. That is the mandatory minimum carbon tax that you pay from coast to coast, except in Quebec. They have a little special deal there in Quebec and have a little bit of a carve out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, is that something that Alberta should be able to negotiate, possibly the same sort of deal through that Quebec may have had?
Well, they could, but it's only really nibbling around the edges because you're only saving like a few cents a liter. We want it gone completely.
Yes, absolutely.
Obliterate the carbon tax. And so what we want is for a federal political party And hey, the Liberals could change their mind tomorrow, and we'd like that very much, and get rid of it themselves. Or the next party that forms government needs to absolutely sign in parchment, no carbon tax, like first day, before lunch. Cancel carbon tax, have a snack, grab some water, defund the CBC. Before lunch, scrap C-11 too. So I think that provincially speaking here in Alberta, some folks may not realize this, we don't have any Alberta gas taxes right now.
No, that's right.
None. None. We don't have a provincial carbon tax. It's just imposed on us by the feds, by Trudeau and his government. And we actually don't have a fuel tax right now. So you're saving 13 cents a liter, both gasoline and diesel for at least the next 6 months. So big time. Every single tax you're now paying at the pump in Alberta is federal taxes. And it's the lowest tax rate across Canada because we've got no provincial taxes.
Just to show what the difference in the tax is. So I think we're paying about $1.22 for regular gas. What are you paying in Hope right now?
$1.79.
$1.79.
That is correct.
I remember driving out there, moving my daughter to from Victoria to Vancouver, and I think it was almost $2.40 on the island.
Would have been, because in Vancouver, not only are you paying the 2 carbon taxes and the provincial excise tax and all that jazz, they have a massive transit tax there, 18.5 cents per liter.
Wow.
So in Hope here, they're not even paying that transit tax.
So you're paying transit tax even though you're driving your own car? Is that?
Oh yeah. And not just that, on gasoline and diesel. You pay it on parking too. So you're punished like repeatedly. And TransLink is famous for its like ridiculously gold-plated like cafeterias and big executive pay. Like they like to think that they're like the New York Subway Authority or like the London transit system or something. It's bizarre. When really they have a fraction of the population. You know, it's one of those things where it's basically a war on the car. They don't want you to own your private car. If you dare drive a car, they want to tax you into oblivion so that you're punished for doing so. And they want everybody on the bus that probably doesn't exist. And the rapid train that doesn't exist outside your door.
That's right.
So again, this is one of what's really frustrating, just because I hear from working people all the time. I'm from working people. That's my family. Is I'll hear from people saying, I can't afford the basics now. Like food, rent, your heat, energy, can't afford the basics, man. What am I supposed to do? And to the point where the Liberals call the carbon tax a punishment, they mean that. And it really is, because we don't have an affordable, abundant, reliable alternative energy source. What are you going to do? Like some people are really enterprising and they figured out some really new age way of like combination of solar and heat pump and stuff. Those folks are rare. I'm talking about widely available. And
for sure.
People can't flick a switch. They would. They would if they could afford it. They can't. And so this is what we're saying. This is unjust. This carbon tax is unjust. You're punishing people for driving to work, eating, and heating their homes. Eating. Farmers pay the carbon tax on drying their grain. So propane and natural gas, I've seen bills for thousands and thousands of dollars, and that gets passed on.
Yes, it does. Absolutely gets passed on.
Yep.
Somebody said next they will be taxing the air we breathe. Well, just so you know, they're actually taxing the air that we expel. That's where the tax is. As ridiculous as that sounds.
As ridiculous as this sounds, and trust me, I'm not trying to give the government ideas. There's all sorts of studies that taxpayers are funding that you're paying for through different little universities and stuff on taxing how to put this nicely? The element that emits from the south end of a cow. Right. There's all sorts of projects and stuff where they're trying to get people to, swear off meat and stop doing this and going after farmers and very similar to them trying to reduce the nitrogen in fertilizer that farmers are using. It's all very, very intrusive, very big government. And again, this is so, number one, it makes them not accountable.
Yeah.
Because then they're responsible for everything, and government is terrible at doing things.
Yeah.
Like awful. They
Yeah.
should not do most things. And two, we can't afford to be all and end all, cradle to grave for every human being in Canada. Like taxpayers can't afford it. It has to be independent wealth generation.
Yeah.
But sometimes the state, the feds in Ottawa don't understand that.
Wow. So there you go. There's a lot of money that's just being wasted. As a matter of fact, there was a little blurb that came across my my emails a couple of days ago, and it's a long story. But essentially, this guy did a comparison between buying a house and basically living back in the 1980s, let's say 88, I forget which year it was, versus now.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so they was talking about, if it's 19% interest rates back then, because it really was. I remember buying my first car, and I think I paid 14% on it. And everybody was making $2,000 a month, but we still were able to make those payments. Now, fast forward to now, and yeah, interest rates are low. Let's say 5%, 5.25%.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're not making as much money in relation to what our debt ratio is, there's no way. Like I'm quite concerned about, I've got 2 daughters. They're both in university right now, both going to be professionals. And I'm concerned that they will not be able to own their own house when they're done.
Yeah. A lot of people are in that situation.
Yeah.
In British, it's one of the reasons why one of the main reasons we moved to Alberta.
Yeah.
Because both my husband and I are professionals. We're in our 40s.
Yeah.
We literally couldn't afford a house.
No.
Like anywhere. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I know so many people in our boat where they were pinching together every single nickel they could find in order to buy a house, and then make sure they've always got at least 2 renters in their basement, man.
Yes. Yeah. You're right.
They're called mortgage helpers. These human beings who rent rooms in these people's basements. And this became standard fare across and this is not just in like fancy condo Vancouver.
Yeah.
This is in like average, like Chilliwack.
And in Calgary, they basically did the exact same thing. When Nenshi was in as the mayor, he basically kind of went through the process of making residential suites, which are basically in the basement, available. And all you had to do was apply and make sure that, you had, I forget, toilet, kitchen, and a way out through a window or something like that. It was very, very simplistic, right? I've got 2 neighbors that are doing exactly the same thing. So they've actually got renters in theirs. I should be renting out my basement.
Well, but look how nice it is, right? It's kind of, you got your own little cave there. But see, in Calgary, some people do that, but that is like a requirement.
Yes.
In British Columbia, unless you're one of the folks who was fortunate enough, you already own your house from the 80s and the 90s or whatever. Yeah. But even then, now the government is sniffing around. Oh, maybe we should have a home equity tax. Yeah. So that when these folks eventually do sell their home, the home they own and live in, the only house they own. Yeah. So that the government can stick its little fingers in there and take that money away from either the person's kids that are supposed to be inheriting the home, or say you've just moved on to the housing ladder, as they call it, and you've sold your first condo and you're trying to eke out maybe a little backyard for your kids. The bloody federal government is really thinking about reaching its hand in there.
That's disgusting.
It's totally disgusting. Yeah. It's your house. It's your castle. Back off, man. Yeah. That's been the case since the 70s here in Canada. You don't get income taxed on the sale of your home, your own home. Yeah. Right. We're not talking about people who own like 6 properties and whatever. Yeah. We're talking about your house. Yeah. And so, the government is going to try to go after that. Now they swear up and down that, there's nothing to see here. This is all, again, back to C-11. Yeah. It's all misinformation. It's all misinformation. Well, no, it's not. Because we caught them using Freedom of Information requests that they were spending about $500,000 to get CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which is a federal crown corporation, to pay UBC to study a home income tax. Yeah. But they'll tell us that, nothing to see here, just trust us, we're the government. No, thanks, we're good. Well,
I certainly hope that they don't do that. And again, if there's even grumblings about it, talk to your MP, make sure that that does not happen, because that would actually be
You know,
detrimental.
a friend of mine once said, I think it's something to the effect of, it's really low. Like less than 3% of people are involved in electoral politics.
Yes. Yeah.
Meaning like member of a political party, you're helping out a riding association, you're a scrutineer.
Yeah.
That's a really small number of people.
And that's in Canada, because in the States, that number is like huge.
Yeah.
Right. And again, because that's the way that they're grown up, right? They go through school, they learn about politics, and you know,
I don't know what they're learning there now, but yeah.
No. Well, I was going to say,
what if we doubled that? What if we doubled the number of people in Canada that are politically aware and hold politicians' feet to the fire? We probably wouldn't have carbon taxes going up and tripling, by the way, within the next 7 years. We wouldn't have the federal government sniffing around our homes, thinking about a home equity tax. If we just doubled the number of people who are really into this and holding government to account, we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah. That's why we're doing what we're doing with the Alberta Prosperity Project. I mean, anybody that's watching here right now should be, what's the nice way of saying it? Astute. They're knowledgeable enough. They're engaged enough in politics to at least a very minimal point where they would say, no, I need to find out what's going on with this. Because I can tell you right now, I've got friends, neighbors, family that are probably watching whatever that happens to be the best show on Netflix right now. And they don't care, because to them, it doesn't impact what's going on, but it'll nip them in their ass. And
it will. And I feel that.
Yeah.
Because they should be able to.
Yeah. Government
should be a machine that sits in the corner of your house and generally runs okay. You got to change the oil in the thing occasionally, but it usually should just be a dependable little thing that does its job.
Yeah.
But in the last 7 years in particular, and there are lots of problems before that too, but in the last 7 years, this thing has taken over a lot of people's homes.
Yeah.
It is telling them where they can work. It's telling them what they can drive. It's telling them how to heat their house. In some cases, it's starting to veer into like what kind of food they should be able to buy.
Yeah.
It is, like, to borrow a phrase from Pierre Poliver, he called it, what did he say, big and bossy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Number one, for accountability reasons and freedom purposes, government shouldn't be big and bossy. And two, from taxpayers' perspectives, big bossy government is bloody expensive to pay for. And we don't have the money for it.
No.
So government should be, should fit inside like a phone booth.
Yeah.
Over there.
Yeah.
And you should have your free weeknights.
Yeah.
People should.
And a lot of people just look at the government as the people that you vote for. And that's not true, right? I mean, you're basically voting in your minister, or not your ministers, your representative, and then they get to a certain point, and then, if you're a minister, you take over a portfolio and all that. But it's all this other bureaucracy that's underneath it, in which they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars just to make a couple of decisions and then go golfing. Now, granted, that may not be 100% true, but I mean, that's definitely the perception. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is that we've got this bloated middle management bureaucracy that shouldn't be there.
You're right. And I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah.
Because they're the two pillars of government. They're the ones that we see most often, which are the elected politicians, who at least need to put, their name on the line every minimum 4 years, less if it's a minority government.
Yeah.
So you have to vote for them or not. But there's a huge element of government that most people don't see, and that is the unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah.
And those unelected bureaucrats have more and more power. Now, when you are so there's the political side of government, like I just said, the politicians were elected. They then have staff, who help them.
That's right. Their office staff, admin staff, whatever.
I was a director of communications for a short period of time, helping on that front. Then over here, there's the department.
Yeah.
Those are the bureaucrats that quite often they figure they run the show. Yeah. You guys are temporary, man. Like, we're going to see another few faces next time after this election.
Yeah.
So we're just going to do what we want. And if you let them, they will just run roughshod over you.
Yeah.
And they will spend what they want. They will say what they want. They will drag their feet and not get something done forever. Yeah. It's pretty awful. And taxpayers are paying for it. And we saw during the pandemic or during the COVID mess that we saw tons and tons of pay raises, bonuses, handed out to bureaucrats whose entire departments had been shut down. For goodness sake, we had bureaucrats within tourism who were getting big fat bonuses while all the hotels were,
I know. Even in tourism, of course, I deal with entertainment, and I book bands and et cetera, et cetera. And I know places like Banff, Jasper, Lake Louise, and even the cities. Tourism in Edmonton and Calgary are definitely down. And it's frustrating as to where that, you get the people in the middle management that are still making the money despite the fact that nobody's showing up for tourism.
Yeah. Right? A friend of mine who is our federal director, Franco Terrazzano. If folks don't follow him yet online, please do. He is a workhorse. He's an Alberta boy, and he's out there in Mordor, also known as Ottawa. And he called it the tale of two pandemics.
Yeah.
So there's us who works in private industry or energy or entertainment, like you were saying. Yeah. I've got a very good friend of mine. I went to high school with her. She was running the Heritage Inn there in Brooks, Alberta. Yeah. Lots of folks on this side. That's one group. And then there's government.
Yeah.
Government, most government workers. I'm not counting like the frontline people who were really affected. I mean the bureaucrats.
Yeah.
The bureaucrats sailed through this in many cases. So much so that now there, in some cases, the government employees who work at the Canada Revenue Agency are demanding massive pay hikes, or they're going to strike right around tax time.
Wow.
So they're not even saying, you know what, we're sure lucky we still have our jobs. And wow, that was pretty great that we could work from our laptops from home in our yoga pants for the past 3 years. Let me count my blessings. No. In many cases, they're demanding like a 40% pay raise over the next 3 years.
Okay, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
We had to check it 3 times.
Yeah.
Because we thought that we were misunderstanding. No, it's about 40% over the next 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I know I'm making less in the last year than I have like in the last 3 or 4 years. It's just dropping. And then again, your ratio of what money you have to spend on debt and living versus what you have for entertainment and whatever. Mm-hmm. Like that's almost non-existent for a lot of people. Oh, it's like this now, like that.
Yeah. And don't let the feds get away with this either, because inflation is almost completely their fault.
Yeah.
So they're going to try to throw their hands up and say, like, it's their version. Of course, they would never say it like this. Their version is like, oh, it was an act of God.
Yeah.
What were we to do? Inflation is a global phenomenon. Well, no. Like your mother might have told you, if all your friends jump off a bridge, does that mean you have to too?
Yeah.
Well, they jumped first in this case. They have run up the deficits so often each year over year that the Bank of Canada has printed, I think it was something crazy that Terrazzano said, like $300 billion to paper over Trudeau's budget deficits over and over and over again. Well, what happens then?
Yeah.
Inflation.
It has to.
It totally. That's how this works.
Yeah.
But the Prime Minister, in his own language, said, "Forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy."
They'll just fix themselves. I believe that's what he said.
What did he say?
I think he said it's okay. They'll fix itself or something.
No. The budget will balance itself.
That's right.
We'll grow the economy from the heart outwards. And forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
Wow.
G7 country, everybody. This is why we're more than $1 trillion in debt. That's why we've got runaway inflation. This is why you need people who do think about monetary policy. The adults, they need to be running the show.
Yeah. What was the debt at when Trudeau took over versus what it is now? Do you know?
Oh, I don't quite know. It was a little over $500 billion. I do know that he's almost doubled it.
Wow.
Not quite. But he's almost doubled it in the past 7 years. Yeah. And again, I can hear folks saying, what about the pandemic?
Oh, yeah, we had to give money to people. And
Fair enough. But if you look at their 2019 budget, think back. Everybody remember. Wasn't that a nice time? 2019, before anything happened.
We could actually do stuff and
Right. And nobody, a lot fewer people were having anxiety issues. So 2019, no tsunami, We were not being invaded by aliens.
That's right.
Nothing major was happening.
Yeah.
The federal government spent more money in 2019 than they did in any 1 year of the Second World War.
So they spent money in terms of programs and
whatever, man.
Okay. Yeah. They
so
just spent,
look at their budget, look at their line items, add it all up.
Yeah.
They spent more money in the 2019 fiscal year than they did in any 1 year of the Second World War, adjusted for inflation and population growth.
Wow.
This is how spend crazy the feds are. I'll give you just waste examples help people picture this. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I was saying before, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Okay.
Yeah.
Kinder Morgan, the company, was going to spend its own money, $7 billion, to hire men and women to twin their pipeline from Edmonton to Burnaby.
Yeah.
They had green lights for years. Then all of a sudden, the lights turned to like blinking kind of orangish.
Yeah.
And the feds dragged their feet. They dragged their feet and ragged the puck so long that the private company went, you guys, I'm heading out of here. Here you go.
Yeah.
So what did I just say? $7 billion of private money going into people's pockets.
Yeah.
It's now $21 billion.
Wow.
And it's the federal government and it's taxpayers paying for it. That's just one example.
Yeah.
So the amount of money, I think it's the amount of money that they have now wasted on trying to fumble and take over the Trans Mountain Pipeline could have built us a brand new awesome hospital in every province in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah. And like if you look at little waste, as they call it, we have a program within foreign affairs. I forget what they call foreign affairs nowadays. It's like international affairs, but it's called the Mission Cultural Fund. Yeah. It's basically just a slush fund where they blow money through it. Mm-hmm. We literally pay, I forget how much it was, but 1 nickel is too much. We spent money on a sex toy exhibit in Germany.
Wow.
We spend money, I'm not joking. We spend money flying Canadian chefs around the world to ambassadors in other countries when they're hungry.
Wow.
Yes.
Why is this not on CBC?
That's funny that you've made a full circle here, my friend.
I mean, wow, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, and these are just ones we know about.
Yeah. One thing I have, since I've been really into politics lately, is I've been watching, the House of Commons and the legislature. Yeah. But I'm actually surprised at how much wasted time these government officials, elected officials, waste. And maybe there's some good to this, but just touting that such and such today turned 100. Hey, let's clap. And such won their curling bond spiel and clap. I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought that they would be in the ledge going, okay, well, we're spending this money here. Well, we got to No, they don't do that.
It is so neat. And this is meant as a huge compliment.
Yeah.
As a lifelong political nerd, as a small child, I was awkward. I watched Reagan get reelected on TV, right? I was always into it.
Wow.
It's so nice listening to a normal person suddenly encounter the gangling monster of government. Yeah, man. They will do that. Yeah. And so the federal government, what's funny is member statements go from in Eastern time 2:01 to 2:16. Okay. So it is 15 minutes of member statements, and that's where you hear the whole shout out things.
Yeah.
To give you an example, so that's 15 minutes. Yeah. I still think it's 15 minutes too long, but whatever.
Yeah.
In so I know this for a fact because I lived in Nova Scotia for a period of time, and I've got family there. In Nova Scotia, that stuff takes 3 hours.
Well, of course it would.
Hey, man, could you just not post this on the bulletin board like the weatherman does at in the evenings? Shout out to Carol and Tom on their 50th anniversary. That's nice, but could we move things along here? But this is government. This is government. Yeah. If they make eye contact with something, they waste money doing it.
Wow.
And so you can have big ticket items that they waste money on, like unnecessarily purchasing the Trans Mountain Pipeline when private company was going to do it.
Going to do it anyways. Yeah.
At their expense. Or little dumb things. Like I said, paying for a German sex toy exhibit.
That,
hey man, if you're
I'm going to look for that and post that.
Google Canadian taxpayers German sex toy.
Okay, I'm totally doing that right now, just because that's.
Don't image it though. just
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll be grayed out. German or Canadian taxpayers.
Canadian Taxpayers Federation Waste, WASTE.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sex toy exhibit, Germany. It'll pop up. I'm so glad.
Teddy Waste Awards. Is that part of that?
That's it. That's us.
Okay. Well, let me see if it shows up. It shows up as a PDF. Just give me a second here. Oh, there's no pictures. There's no pictures.
Oh, yeah. There are some pictures attached to the story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. I see one right here. I'm gonna quickly blurb it up. Is this? It is 3, 2, 1. That's it. That's all you need to see.
There might be kids watching. So yeah, like in it, like I'm laughing because otherwise I'm gonna cry, right?
Yeah.
This is an example. This is an example of what the feds blow your money on.
Yeah.
And then there's a million other examples, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where when they come out and say, oh, well, we've cut things to the bone and it's going to be austerity if we, no, dude, this is not austerity. Like cut all of this stuff. So
with the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, you guys are really looking at federal tax.
We do provincial as well. That is why we got the UCP candidates to all sign the pledge.
Yes. Okay. What about municipal?
We do what we can municipally, but again, like there's about 100 major cities across Canada, depending on what size you are. I live in Lethbridge.
Right. Yeah.
So there we quite often rely on whistleblowers.
Yeah.
So quite often we will get, say, somebody who works for the city in Edmonton or Calgary or Vancouver, wherever, Nanaimo. Yeah. That'll say something like, you know what, I can't sleep at night because we're wasting money on this. Look into it. And then we'll file a freedom of information request and hopefully find stuff out about it. Yeah. And then also around budget time, when they're floating their big, scary tax increases that they always spook people with first, and then they come back in lower, we'll try to cover that stage of their budgeting as well. Oh, and this, I'm glad you asked this, because there's a really good element of our website at taxpayer.com. And that is where how to start your own ratepayer group. So RATE payer. That's how the Taxpayers Federation was first born in 1990. It was a merger of the Alberta ratepayers and the Saskatchewan ratepayers. And so, folks, if you're retired, if you're a former business owner, if you're a really meticulous high school teacher and you like keeping notes and minutes on things, your time could be very well spent being one of those folks who watches. There you go. There's all the contact information. Who watches your city council. Yeah. Who goes to those meetings, who listens in, and quite often you can listen in online now. It's amazing. And you keep a ticker on what these folks are saying, what their plans are, if they've got any weird, like, let's all meet at the casino in a few months in order for some AGM. No. Really? You can keep track of all that stuff. And so here, it's all local ratepayers groups, and it explains to you how you can join one or start one. Yeah. You're looking at their website there right now. Grumpy, we call them the Grumpies. They're in Victoria. They do great work. Yep. Oh, they're wonderful. They're the ones that I think they were the ones that discovered that one of their city councilors didn't want to support Remembrance Day services anymore. And
that happened in a few places in Alberta, I believe. Claresholm. No, you know what? I think that's what it was, but I don't want to say the wrong town just in case it's not. But there was something that was kind of abolished so that they're not doing Remembrance Day ceremonies because it was, I don't know, cost too much, or maybe it was they were worried about people being masked to go there. I don't know what the situation was, but obviously there's something, right? So
yeah, and there is also so you can get the local ratepayers, you can get those folks there, and you can also start your own. Right. Like when I was a reporter for a long time, I used to cover court. That was one of my major beats. Yeah. And so criminal court. So I would cover murder trials, kidnapping. There was even a treason one that I covered in Halifax. Wow. And there used to be, before everything went crazy 3 years ago, there used to be this cadre of court watchers, usually older folks, quite often ladies, lots of fellas in there too. And they were great because that courthouse belongs to you.
Yeah.
That is just like City Hall. That is a public building. Yeah. Open court is one of the central foundations of the West. Okay. Yeah. You are to go to attend court and observe it. That's why they have a public gallery. It's literally called that. Yeah. And so those are folks who would sit there like this with their little notebooks and they'd keep track of all these things. Yeah. And you become a real vessel of knowledge and ability and experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is powerful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would encourage folks, if you want to get involved at your local level, you don't necessarily have to run for council, but go to the committee of the whole, go to those places, and you can keep track of things. And if you see something crazy, give us a call, give your local newspaper a call, because quite often the local newspaper will care, but they don't have that person to send anymore. Quite often they don't have, unfortunately, that local reporter to go cover. Yeah. So you're really doing a deep community service by doing a ratepayer group.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we've really said that people need, the reason we're in the trouble we're in realistically is because we've been apathetic and we've just let things go because we weren't knowledgeable about what was going. And of course, with you've been involved in politics and all that since you were a kid. So you're the abnormal.
I know, it's okay. You can say it. Yeah. We're all nerds at the Taxpayer.
Yeah. But like really, I've only been involved maybe in the last 3 years, right? And only because something happened in terms of my business that was shut down and it kicked my ass in order to do this. And I think everybody that's watching has a story on why they're even involved and why they're even watching, right? And I think that's the important thing too, is to get people get involved. Like whether you do these ratepayer, you do something to do with your municipal government or your school board, or even get involved in APP or some sort of neighborhood council, like community association. Just get involved, get out and meet with people, and because that's where the strength is going to happen, and that's basically what we need to do in the next. Especially for our next election, for sure. I mean, because we have no idea really what's going to end up happening after that. So, and I think now would be a good time if anybody does have any questions, please put your question with 3 question marks, and I'm just going to scroll back through here and see if there's
a phone call in the middle of that. There, my auntie picked it up in the other room though. So
okay, well then that's good.
We can do media as well. A lot of folks don't realize that taxpayers are paying for a lot of the media now, and we need to stop the media bailout.
Yes, they are. So when we were out in Ottawa, Kris and I went out. We drove the picker truck from the whistle stop out there, and that was quite the amazing adventure, both there and back. And never mind being out there, but the amount of garbage being spewed and misinformation by the media. We would actually have press releases and in the beginning, like the first week we were out in Ottawa, we'd have press releases and we'd have CTV and CBC come out, and they would totally twist the story, or they wouldn't even broadcast what the actual the press release was or conference was, and they would just totally twist it so bad that after the first week, there were many that would just many press conferences that would happen that would say, no, CBC, you're not allowed, CTV, you're not allowed, Global, you're not allowed. So they would end up just being on the outside. Now, the downside with that is then if they're not allowed into the press conference, they actually don't know what's going on. So, you could argue that was kind of detrimental to the cause at the time. But yeah, I mean, you worked in media, and how would that have worked? Like, if you were you involved with the convoy, or did you do any reporting on the convoy?
I was with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation at the time, so I could tell you how much it's costing the truckers to fill up in the carbon tax when they're driving out there, and how bloody expensive it was. And we know, for example, we blew so much money on the CERB and COVID, and we had friggin' CRA handing out billions of dollars to people who didn't need it, like people in
Yeah.
prison, dead people, whatever.
Yeah.
But I personally followed it very closely because, well, I care about Canada.
Yeah.
And two, I lived in Ottawa for like 15 years, and I worked on Parliament Hill. I was a member of the Parliamentary Press Gallery for a long
Yeah.
time. And so this gets back to journalism.
Yeah.
Okay. And it gets back to free expression, and it gets back to being able to hold government to account.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't say with certainty, because I'm only one person, I don't know what's changed a lot in mainstream media as far as narrative goes. I can't quite explain that. Because I'm like I said before, I'm from rural British Columbia. I'm from working class roots, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, there are exceptions like myself, but generally speaking, the folks who are members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery are often urban, university educated, and quite often, and this is no slight on them, it's just a fact, quite often they are more left of center.
Yes.
Typically. But for the longest time, we were taught in journalism school to, number one, you're never going to be objective. You are not omniscient. You're not objective because you're a human being. You have experiences in your life.
That's right.
But
True.
you can work hard to be balanced.
Yeah.
You can make that extra effort to reach across the aisle, to find that other quote, to balance out your story.
Yeah.
That was always kind of the toolbox that was set in front of you as a journalist. Who, what, where, why, when. It was the 5 W's. That's why that show is called W5.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That was always the kind of the raison d'etre, the mission, right? Comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable.
Yeah.
Speak truth to power.
Yeah.
That it's changed a lot, and I can feel it. It's like an ether change, and I don't know. I don't have all the answers as to why, but I can give you 2 reasons why. One, there aren't the bodies. There just aren't the physical people working as producers, video editors, camera people, etc. in the newsrooms anymore. So when I finished journalism school, I went to BCIT. I went to trade school for journalism. So I learned how to connect all the cameras and do all that stuff, and how to not get sued, legal journalism. 2-year diploma program. When I left there in 98, 99, whenever it was, here's an example. There were 2 full-time journalists working at the Vancouver Sun, whose job it was to cover softwood lumber. That's it.
Wow.
That was their job. I know. Yeah. 1 paper, 2 people, 1 topic. Full-time salary positions.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking about Oz right now. It's so different. So now, where there would have been around 20 people in the newsroom, there's now a handful, like maybe 5.
Yeah.
And they're doing everything. They're often doing radio, TV, the interweb thing. They're printing stuff off, all this stuff. Yeah. And so there just isn't the content. So say you're a producer and you've got a 1 hour or 2 hour supper time newscast you need to put there every day.
Yeah.
There used to be a bunch of stuff coming down the conveyor belt that was local.
Yeah.
You had your city hall reporter, your court reporter, your consumer affairs reporter about how this, furnace salesman is ripping people off, whatever. Every day. There's no longer stuff to put there.
No.
So that's why they're taking that 2-hour-long speech from some health bureaucrat every day. That's why they're ripping and reading verbatim what the prime minister said with very little analysis, pushback, or scrutiny.
Yep.
Like so number 1, bodies. They're physically, and I'm talking private newsrooms, of course. I'm not talking about CBC.
Yeah.
So that's a huge issue there. 2, unfortunately, a lot of the media now is getting funded by the state. The government, in many cases, is paying journalists.
Yeah.
And I cannot stress enough what kind of kryptonite that is. I don't care if you are left-wing and writing for Canada Land or something, or I don't know what, D-Smog blog or whatever groups that they still have over there, or like you're working for the Rebel or True North or somewhere in between. Doesn't matter. Yeah. You shouldn't be paid by the state as a journalist. Yeah. Because one of your key jobs is to speak truth to power. Yeah. So what happens if you're depending on that guy in power for your paycheck?
Oh yeah, you're totally skewed on that for sure.
It's not gonna work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, even if you try your darndest.
Yeah.
This is like, say you're a referee, okay, and you're calling a game. This is like taking a side bet on who's going to win,
Yeah.
but still swearing you can call it down. You can't.
Yeah. And only getting paid by the home team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No human being could do that. And even if somehow they magically could, the perception of bias, just like in ethics, the perception of corruption or bias, it's a killer.
Yeah.
It lacks you lose faith in what you're watching. And so to give you an example on the media bailout, in some cases in these newspapers, some of these positions, $13,000 of that reporter's existence in the newsroom position was coming from the feds.
Yeah.
How are you going to yell at that guy and chase him down the hallway with a camera rolling on your shoulder?
Yeah.
If you know in the back of your head that your salary, your next mortgage payment might depend on whether or not he's ticked off at you.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to work, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there are less people working in journalism now then as what there were before. And obviously that is one of the main reasons why we've all probably seen the videos of, newsroom that's 6 o'clock news and we all start the same story, the same verbatim, because they all start from something that's probably done, what is it? Telex. And remember those back in the day? And that stuff would have come through the Associated Press, like written by somebody as a press
off
release.
The wire, as they would
exactly, off the wire. So that's the one. And that's kind of what ended up happening with the newspapers as well. I remember reading something from, say, the Vancouver Sun, Calgary Sun, Winnipeg Sun, Toronto Sun. They would all have kind of the same stories. And of course, they all had AP written next to them, which basically means Associated Press.
Yep.
But they basically got rid of all the local news. We don't hear about the local hockey teams, junior teams, and even bantam. You don't hear about that because there's just not enough people out there to do it.
They aren't
there's
there.
No money in it.
There's no person out there harvesting that crop.
Yeah.
So it's
but
not
yet,
through the
but
door.
yet you would think that if we were giving the CBC $1.2 billion, that there should be some local people covering that stuff.
And, there's a handful here and there. You'll still find them. It's like finding a unicorn. And this is I know really hardworking reporters who are still in it to win it. And they're trying darn hard, but there just is, I like what Alyssa's saying there. If you don't mind me reading a comment, journalism has changed dramatically in the past 30 years. Writing a story, getting 3 sides to any story, having a byline are a thing of the past.
That is true. Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. And just again, using an anonymous source back in the day, and I say this as if I'm writing about, back when, phones were still invented. No, I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Using an anonymous source was a big deal.
Yeah.
You had to get a big permission from your bureau chief, your editor. You had to be willing to soul search and ask yourself, would I defend this person's right to anonymity in court and refuse to name them? Yes. Those were heavy questions. And now it seems to be there a lot. And again, a lot of them don't have the time. So they're ripping and reading. They're taking that newscast live forever. They're not pushing back. Quite often these politicians or these bureaucrats, you see them at a podium.
Yeah.
Almost always, if you swung that camera around, they'd be talking to a nearly empty theater.
Really?
Nearly empty, auditorium. And there's all this seating. It looks like a little mini theater, for private viewing quite often. So you'll have, there's 2 different theaters in Ottawa for this. Most of the government buildings provincially have them. They're almost empty now.
Yeah.
And even when I was working in it, 10 years ago, they would only send 1 cameraman for all the stations. It was called the pool cam.
Yeah.
And that way they didn't have to spend money on the extra camera person.
Yeah.
Because it was Global's turn or CTV's turn or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard that term before. So there's a couple of people that have said media financed by Big Pharma as well. Big Pharma advertising revenue. So we've all seen, there's a sporting event and it's brought to you by Pfizer, that sort of thing. I guess that's, I'm not even sure. they're obviously using that money for paying for the production of shows.
Paying your lights.
Yeah.
And again, like from a CTF perspective, we stick mostly to government and taxes and stuff.
Yeah.
But if folks don't want to watch a network that is funded by whatever company, we don't know whatever company it is, then fine, pick one that is subscription based.
Yeah.
Right. There's lots. I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of my time on YouTube listening to lectures and podcasts and really cool shows that are all individual based.
Yeah.
So just imagine if you've got a really good show and you've got millions of people watching and they each chip in $5-10.
Absolutely.
You're going to have some amazing programming. And again, that's where we want that left up to the market.
Yeah.
Right. So if you've got, a big company, corporation funding it, whatever, don't take taxpayers' money. Or if you want it all like $5, $10, $15 donation, subscription-based type coverage, power to you, man.
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions. I don't know whether we can answer some of these, but I'm going to show them anyways because I know they've been asked. Okay. Is anyone looking into the new green agenda biodiesel plant in Fort Saskatchewan? How many thousands of acres of canola will be required to feed this plant? There's no better than growing corn to produce ethanol. Yeah, to actually use that land to offset 10% of the gas when they could actually be using it for food instead of ethanol. I don't know if you want to make any comment on that.
It's actually something that I do know a little bit about because I did a lot of reading for. So there's a think tank that some of the folks who are watching that might like. It's brand new. It's called secondstreet.org.
Okay.
So, First Street. But Second Street is actually apparently the most common name of a street in Canada. And they did a really big deep dive on what would happen if we kept it in the ground. Yeah. So as the oil and gas protesters like to say, keep it in the ground. Some of them say, not all of them. Yeah. What would that be like? Okay. Say they kept it in the ground tomorrow. Let's do a thought process and see what would happen. There's a study on there called What If We Kept It in the Ground? And they get into that. And I can't recall the number, but it was big. It was like, if we switch just to plant-based plastics, and I think biodiesel was in there too, it would take up, it was something big. It was like a quarter or a third of arable land.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a startlingly big number. I'm paraphrasing, like data, but it's secondstreet.org. Oh. And I think the study is called What If We Kept It in the Ground? So that's a really good question. I haven't looked into that one specifically, but your question. Yeah. Okay, I will look into that though if you think the taxpayers' money is going into it. Keep an eye on it.
There's questions that are coming up that I wish I could answer, and maybe what I'll do is I'll do another after we're done here. I usually do another podcast with Kris and myself, and some of these questions relate to that as opposed to what we're talking about right here.
Okay.
So I think that's probably what we'll end up doing for some of these.
Any questions for just transition or carbon tax?
If there's anything like that, please say something.
To give you an example, like how much it costs people in a carbon tax, just the federal mandatory minimum, it costs you $10 to fill up a minivan. Okay. Extra just in the carbon tax.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
$16 every time you fill up just a gasoline pickup truck. If you're driving one of those big kind of Super Duty diesels, so your pickups, that's like $25 every single time. And for a big rig, for the truck drivers who deliver everything we eat and use, that's about $140 every time you're filling up. And that cost all layers on top of itself. Yeah. And then you've got, say, natural gas costs, which is for home heating and for that grocery store, right? And then it all layers like this. We even pay carbon tax on locomotive diesel. So, Canada's huge. Everything comes to us on a train and then a truck. It's in a store. That's 3 levels of carbon tax right there. Oh, plus the farmer. Yeah. Super expensive. Yeah. And it's going to triple. This cost I just rattled off here is going to triple in the next 7 years. Yeah. And we're going to have a second carbon tax imposed upon us this summer federally. It's going to be about 10 cents a liter of gas. Yeah.
Just had my propane tank filled for $2,100. Should last 3 months. And it's $450 in taxes. Yeah.
Wow. And see, it's not something you can opt out of. This is not something that you're just buying for fun.
So how does that work? Like, obviously, I don't get a GST rebate. I don't get a carbon tax rebate. I know my kids do. So how does that offset for them? Like, obviously, they're not spending $450 on a propane tank, but yet they still manage to get, I don't know, $100, $200 every month. At least it seems like that. What is that actually supposed to be offsetting?
Great question. So, okay, there's a few things here.
Okay.
Number one, it's absolutely silly for the government to say you'll get more than you put into it. Yeah. You'll get more back than you put in. Okay, that is just illogical, as Thomas Sowell would say. He's a brilliant economist. I highly recommend listening to his lecture, Basic Economics. So the government is not a wealth generating entity. You do not make an investment of the carbon tax and get a return upon it. No,
you're right.
So that just logically does not work. Yeah. Two, the Parliamentary Budget Officer. So that's an independent body within the government that scrutinizes spending and budgetary planning in Ottawa. Yeah. The Parliamentary Budget Officer themselves have said that Canadian families, on average, pay more than they get back in the rebates. Yeah. In Alberta, we're getting screwed the most. Yeah. This year, as of April 1st, once that carbon tax clicks up to $65 a ton, the average Alberta family, I think they're out like $850 on the year, including the rebate. So that's including the rebate, everything being spoken for. And that's, of course, because of what I just explained. Yeah. It's this layering. It's not just every now and then filling up your hatchback. Yeah. It's the farmer paying the tax. Yeah. It's the trucker paying the tax. It's the person driving the locomotive paying the tax. It's the grocery store paying the tax. Yeah. And then it's you buying the thing. Yeah. So that is hugely expensive. And so that is why it's frustrating that when the environment minister opens his mouth and says, oh, you're getting more back, that's not true. Yeah. Like that's factually, mathematically incorrect. And the Parliamentary Budget Office themselves says so. Yeah. For folks who if you're at all watching from British Columbia for some reason, you barely get anything back. Yeah. By the time a two-person working couple in British Columbia hits about $58,000 a year, you get zero. So the average two-person working couple in BC, I think, makes like $87,000 a year. So like average working people in BC get absolutely nothing back.
Wow.
Yep.
There's another, I'm not even sure what that is. The new underused house tax.
That requires anyone who owns more than one home in Canada need to report these homes, pay for this. Oh, yes. So this is since I'm from BC, I know what this is. So in British Columbia, they have imposed an empty homes tax or whatever term they want to use. And this was their big government scheme or idea to solve the housing problem.
And people buying up houses and not using them? Is that the idea? Okay. Yeah.
And so, So on the surface, it seems like, government's trying to have a solution. Okay. Number one, the government's solution to everything seems to be tax it until it dies. Yeah. So, and it doesn't help anything. We still have a critical shortage of housing in British Columbia. Yeah. I'll give you an example.
Of housing or of affordable housing?
Those two go hand in hand because it's supply and demand, right? Yeah. Yeah. So if you strangle the housing supply, which they have done in construction for the past 20, 30 years here in BC, because for whatever reason, it's too high, it's too big, it's past this imaginary line, like whatever. Yeah. If you strangle the building of new homes and then you tax the Jesus out of them while they're being built, that is going to increase the cost. This is supply and demand, right? And so their silly solution to everything is just tax it. And then if you do a thought experiment on, let's imagine that it's not all the problem. Let's imagine, for argument's sake, that the entirety of the housing problem is because super rich people, like mega rich people, own more than one house. Yeah. Super mega rich person is not going to care about a tax like this. Yeah. They're buying an extra house to park their Ferrari and motorbike in. They're not going to care about this. Yeah. But this will pinch the person who has that condo they're holding on to in the downtown area for their university student, or who has to have it open for their mom, who has to have constant medical care, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's going to nail that working person and bite them, right?
Yeah.
And it always winds up screwing up. So we had countless calls into the CTF when they were first putting this through in BC of, they're counting my cabin as a secondary residence. This thing is up past like Gibson's. It barely has heat. You are not commuting to your TELUS job in Burnaby, man, from this thing. But no, it falls under this certain parameter because it's the government. Again, more government and bigger taxes is never the solution to this. And it's probably going to wind up with a very similar situation. Now it's going to be federal.
Yeah.
Just imagine they're more fully removed from the actual location. Yeah.
So Alyssa asked this other question too. How is it that the kids get this tax refund and we don't? So just so you know, I call anybody that looks like they're under 30 or 35 kids.
Yeah, me too. It drives me crazy.
So my daughters are 22 and 24. So, and they're both in university. So they're kids. They are definitely kids. And again, they, I don't know what the magic number is, but I think it's, what is it? If you're under 30,000 in a year, you end up getting your GST and carbon tax credit. I don't even know.
Yeah.
But,
so quite often it depends. So if you're living more urban and, quite often you will wind up with a refund. But on average, the way that it balances out, most families are getting nailed by the carbon tax, especially in Alberta. So your university level kids might be getting a refund, but quite often you won't be. Right? This is just how it's again. This is the mess. This is the mess. And we're not even talking about the administrative costs.
No.
We've got queries into that right now. We have questions into the federal government right now, finding out how much we're spending on administering this bean counting redistribution because of the carbon tax. Which, by the way, for the environmentalists watching, and I mean that earnestly, because I'm from BC and I love the environment and it's wonderful, it's not reducing emissions. It's not. British Columbia has had the highest carbon taxes in all of North America since 2008. And apart from a blip in 2020, when a lot of people were locked down and couldn't go anywhere, their emissions keep steadily rising.
Yeah.
Even though we have the highest carbon taxes. Why? Because the demand for energy is inelastic.
Yeah.
We must go to work. We must heat our homes. We must eat. And like I said, there's no alternative, affordable, abundant energy source that we can switch to tomorrow.
Yeah.
So this is why. The emissions will keep going up and the carbon taxes keep on going up anyway. If folks really, really, really want to reduce global emissions, sell natural gas to India.
Yeah.
For real. You'll dramatically reduce emissions if you want that to happen, because right now they're burning animal dung and wood scrap. 200 million of them are doing that every day. Yeah. It's crazy arithmetic.
Yeah. Or sell LNG to the European Union.
Oh, the ones who have been begging for it. Apparently there's no market for it though.
Yeah. Here's another question. Is all mail sent to government officials postage free? I'm not 100% sure on that. I think if it goes to an MP, it's free.
Well, yeah, just send it. Oh, they're talking about if they wrote a letter to like the Department of like Roads and Bridges type thing.
Yeah.
Good question. Then in that case, send it to the minister.
Yeah.
So I'll put it this way: for whatever, particular granular issue you have with the federal government, trust me, there is a bureaucracy behind it and a minister in charge of it. Yeah. So figure out who that person is and send it to the office. And yes, it is postage free.
Yeah. There you go. Good. Well, I think then that's probably it for the questions. We're at an hour and 45 minutes.
Again, for me. I hope
I know. We always like to try and wrap this and tie this whole discussion into, how would an independent Alberta be able to get away from what, basically what we've just talked about. And obviously, if we had our own province, we wouldn't have to be putting money into a media group that, as far as we're concerned, is just kind of throwing the money away, right? But yet we'd be able to keep that tax money in and actually create our own if there was enough people that wanted that. I'm a firm believer in doing referendums on everything. Like, to have a lot of this stuff that's just represented by someone that you may or may not have voted for, and to have something that would be, hey, we're going to have a referendum on whether or not we should be giving media money to this entity. What do you think about that? And then, we'd be able to have the conversation about it, and then let the public, the taxpayer, the people that actually live here make that decision. Right. And I think that's important with pretty much anything we've talked about in terms of tax paying, because obviously we see that there is so much waste in tax.
It is a massive amount of wasted money. So the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, I'm the Alberta director within the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We don't take a position on separation or
no, absolutely, and you shouldn't. No, that's
however,
fair.
We can provide tools for accountability.
Yeah.
And I personally am a huge believer in local government, small government, grassroots government, and accountability. And so you can take these tools and run with them as you wish. So, for example, totally with you, the Taxpayers Federation, we're big supporters of referendums, okay? Or I don't know why they started calling it this. They started calling it Citizens Initiative.
Yes, yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm Gen X, so to me, it's still a referendum. So that would mean, you're right. Things like, should we defund the CBC? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Should we have an Alberta police force instead of the RCMP? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Should we abide by the gun grab coming from Ottawa, or should Terry Bryant, our chief firearms officer, tell them to fly a kite? Yes or no? Those are all things that I think most Albertans can rally behind.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And so, referendums or citizens initiative, hugely important. We just had one and won one on equalization.
Yes. And that went absolutely nowhere. Right.
Well,
and that's because of the way it was brought back to the federal government. And
you kind of keep hitting a wall there, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so there is a difference between the citizen initiative and a referendum. The referendum can actually it's just a vote on a question.
Yes.
And that could be put through legislature. It could be put through, a couple of different ways. Citizen initiative is that if we decided to actually put together a question, and how do we get that question into the legislature? Well, and again, it's been explained to me that, you have to have a certain percentage of the voting population. So let's say you need 600,000 signatures, 20% of the voting population. You get that within a certain amount of time, then that can go into the legislature. So that's kind of what we'd be looking at in terms of Alberta Prosperity Project, and kind of putting pressure on the government in power, for sure, to say this is what we want to have as a question. So really, as long as you've got yourself and 599,999 other friends, right, you'd be able to put together a question, and I believe it has to be done within a month or 30 days or 90 days.
There's a lot. It's like if you put a horse in pacers.
Yeah.
They run real fast, but man, their legs are moving in a very specific direction. Yes.
Yeah. It has to be done that way, and that's the only way that it would be done. So I mean, I'm not even sure what the actual process with that is, but let's just say April 1st, you come up and you say, we want to have this referendum on, I don't know, removing the carbon tax. Now, granted, we wouldn't be able to do that, but let's just say that was a referendum question. So we would have that certain amount of time, maybe it's until May 1st, to gather up those 600,000 signatures. So quite a daunting task, unless you've actually got a group of people ready to go at any moment. And not only have that, but have that ability to tap that. And how do you tap that? Well, you need emails. You maybe need a group of people phoning. You need billboards and newspaper and TV ads, because who knows where the people are at that time, and they may not be answering their phones. And so there's a lot of effort and a lot of money in order to even get these referendum questions going. And I've heard that it could be like $2 million a question just to get enough people to be on side with that, right? Or available to sign the petition.
Yeah, it depends on how important the topic is and
Yeah.
how passionate people are about it.
Yeah.
And so that itself, I think, is a good,
Yeah.
what would I call that? A balancing agent, I guess,
Yeah.
to the point
Yeah.
where it wouldn't be a rash thing of, I don't know, we want to paint the lawn blue. Like, just,
Yeah.
you're not going to get dumb, frivolous things like that because
Yeah.
of the effort you just described.
Yeah.
Like, folks
Yeah.
have got to be in it to win it, in order to get even the start of something like that happening.
Yeah.
But these are such powerful tools in our toolbox. If we want to have smaller, local, more accountable grassroots government, things like referendum and citizens initiative are really important. And my other favorite R word in government is recall legislation.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely.
So you should be able to have recall legislation so that what happens is, say, an MLA, if we're just talking Alberta, an MLA campaigns on, I don't know, I promise to never vote in favor of a tax increase, and turn around, they get there, they're in Edmonton, they stand up on their hind legs and they vote in favor of a tax increase. You're like, buddy or girl, you're out of here. What happens then is that you can trigger a by-election. So you have to have enough signatures. They're riding, very similar process of what you just described. And then they have a by-election. Now, what's neat about recall legislation is that the politician, the offending politician, can run. They can run to keep their seat. And then that's a really good question, and it's put directly back to their voters and their constituents, the citizens. So in some cases, that politician lives to see another day, and they're reelected, fair enough. So that means that, I guess, that riding doesn't care so much about that broken promise. Or they can get fired between elections because they didn't keep their word, or because they, spent taxpayers' money incorrectly, whatever it is. So referendums, citizens initiative, recall legislation, audits, auditors generals, sunshine lists, all of this stuff, pledges, all these things.
We do have tools. It's just that most people don't know what those tools are or how to use them.
Exactly.
Right? So that's one of the reasons why I brought up this one, is all this information is enlightening, but what good is it done knowing all this exaggerated spending? It hasn't curbed any of the political waste. Is this topic just a talking point? Well, again, we're basically giving this information out to people so that they're aware. I think awareness and education is key with what's been going on, because if you're ignorant and you just don't know what's going on, then you don't know what's going on.
Yes.
And we need accountability. We need to be able to go ahead and say, no, you know what? I want to know where this money is going. I need an audit. I need to do this.
That's correct. So, and if we don't start somewhere, like this education, like this session we're having right now, and we never push back, then they will eat us.
Yes, they will.
Big government will just grow into this swamp. And before you know it, 80% of your paycheck, instead of just 48, I think was the last number, 45, will be gone. And so here, I'll give you a really good example. So about a year ago, this time last year, Franco Terrazzano and I were getting into the debt clock in Victoria, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation debt clock. It's one of those U-Haul jobs, and we got these massive screens on the side of it showing the federal debt. Okay. I got as far as Lethbridge with them, and then other folks drove all the way across Canada. Now, people are like, oh, well, nobody cares about debt. Well, they sure as heck care about it now. Right? That inflation's going crazy and the interest rates are going up. Suddenly people are paying attention. And if folks can do a thought experiment, remember back into the government of the 90s, okay? A liberal government was in power at the time. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien had a finance minister named Paul Martin. Okay? Paul Martin, at the poking and prodding and reminding of a guy named Preston Manning across the aisle, took the deficit seriously. He was really bothering him. So much so that when he was giving a speech in Vancouver once, he looked over and there was the debt clock sitting there ticking. And he looked and he's like, that damn clock. Like, couldn't get it out of his head. It was living there rent free. And so balanced budgets were popular. They were a thing. This is one of the at the time when the CTF was first launched. And so sometimes we have to be the trend setters, okay? We have to be ahead of the curve. We can't wait for somebody else to do it. We can't wait for it to be something sexy on TV again, that entertainment nights go. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You sometimes have to be that trendsetter.
Mm.
And right now it's biting people in the wallet. So I do think that balanced budgets are going to become sexy again.
We need a debt clock sitting right on the corner of Wellington and Metcalfe.
We parked there. There's a beautiful picture of it if you go to our website. It's
There.
But yeah, it would be nice to have it permanently in
Permanently,
wouldn't
that's
it?
right
Just
too.
cement it right into the corner.
I'll do one more question, because this type of question is being posed to me many times, and I'll get your take on it.
Okay.
What are the possibilities of a full-on tax revolt?
I love that question so much. Okay, so I've looked at this from many different angles. So the standard thing, we are not literally talking about torches and pitchforks. Anybody who's talking, go away. That is not what we're talking about. We are speaking metaphorically. We are talking about people doing tools down, protesting, rallies, mass email campaigns, whatnot. Okay. We think all of those peaceful, non-violent actions, if you're defending yourself as a taxpayer, are really good things. And getting you back to the 90s, the ones I was just explaining, there were anti-tax rallies then. They were massive. They were filling hockey rinks. Right. Axe the tax, no more tax. And
That's right. Yeah.
Right. They were fighting against the GST. And do you think if citizens groups, not just the CTF, but if ratepayer groups and folks who are commenting here right now weren't chewing on the leg of the federal government, do you think that Prime Minister Stephen Harper would have reduced the GST by no?
Right.
That would never have happened. You have to speak up. And one of my earliest tax and government memories was when the GST had come in under Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, the Conservative Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. It's one of the reasons why the CTF started. And I remember when it came in, I'd gone into a video rental store in Vancouver Island with my dad. And the independent video rental store owner was so mad about the GST that he had this massive bag, I mean elephant feeding size bag of peanuts next to his desk. It's so weird. He's like, if you buy a peanut from me for $2, I'll lend you this movie for free. I'm not kidding. He was that mad.
Wow.
In order to get, whatever the nickel was, or 7 cents, or I guess it would have been 14 cents, right? And so that's how, and so it's things like that. It's things like that. And then protesting. So folks, if you want a tax revolt, take a picture of your heating bill, print it, and mail it to your MP. Get thousands of people to do that from your riding.
That's a great idea.
Know their office under. Jam their phone lines. Like, they will listen. Here, another example. So when Aaron O'Toole was leader of the Conservatives, like I said, we would target the Conservative caucus email over and over again. Hey, it's Tuesday evening. Remember us? And then we time it. That's one of the big reasons why he's no longer leader, because unfortunately he signed the pledge, didn't honor it, and all of the folks pushed back. And so that's a form of tax revolt. And so, if folks want to start having conversations like this in public and having rallies, hey man, fill your boots.
I know there's people that have also said on a certain date, don't go buy gas, don't drive your car, don't get, go for groceries. That's all well and done, except for, I know a person that owns a gas station. I know a person that relies on being a mechanic and
you're not hurting the government doing that.
You're not really helping that sort of a situation. And the truth is that you're eventually going to need that gas anyways. You're going to end up just
going to make up. Exactly. It's supply and demand. Again, these are inescapable demands of the human condition. And so again, what we would recommend is go after the politician and their fat little comforts directly. So make them think that the next time they have to go knock on your door, that there's going to be a big sign and a rally against them. That's how you get through to them, because nothing wakes you up faster than being unfortunately worried about your job. Right.
That's right.
So that's what we would encourage people to do. Like, go and no cussing or threatening, obviously.
Yeah.
Be firm, be polite, but be tenacious and
Yeah.
consistent. Be data driven. Don't get personal. Don't go ad hominem. Be data driven, saying, I can't afford this. This is how much this costs. I'm sick and tired of it, and I won't do it anymore. Here.
Yeah.
Put a bumper sticker on your vehicle.
Yeah.
Fly a flag. Like, there's all sorts of ways of fighting back.
Yeah. And the last comment here, would love to hear more talks by and with Kris. There you go.
Oh, thanks.
That's very good.
Thanks, Roxanne.
How do people get a hold of you? Is it just through taxpayer.com or?
Yeah, you can also email me directly anytime. I've got, like, my phone is glued to my hand, like most people. It's K, so my first name is Kris with a K, ksims@taxpayer.com. ksims@taxpayer.com. If you don't remember that or you don't have a pen in your hand, just go to taxpayer.com.
There you go, like that.
Yep. Go straight through. You got it right there. Yep, that's it exactly. Or you can just go through the website and you just go down to spokespeople, and my email should be right there. Feel free. I would love, hey, if you work at a level of government and you're seeing something nuts for waste or something like that, I'm only one person. I may not be able to catch it, but do try. We rely sometimes on whistleblowers.
Yeah. Well, that has been an amazing presentation. Amazing talk. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kris. So yeah, we'll wrap it up here. We'll just say, I mean, we're over 2 hours. So thanks everyone for staying online and watching and listening and commenting and asking questions. I mean, that's the whole reason why we do these webinars. We do them every Wednesday, 7:00. I wish I actually knew what next week's webinar was, but the girl that does this in behind the scenes is still in Cuba, so
that would be Shauna. Yes. I
don't know what next week's webinar is.
And like warm skies.
And people have said to me, so where do we get this list of the webinars that are coming up? I don't know, but I mean, we definitely want to put 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, and often they'll be topical too. So if there's something that maybe happens in the next week or so, and we go, you know what, we really need to be talking about this, then we kind of do that, right? So, but definitely every Wednesday we do these. So, and you know, we did talk about having people involved, and I'd like to at least acknowledge the volunteer group that we have for Alberta Prosperity Project. Again, these are not paid positions; these are people that just they go out of their way and they help run the events. They run the chapter events and even the people that are doing the behind the scenes on this. So thanks again for so much. And if you want to volunteer for something like that, we can always use more volunteers. Just go to albertaprosperityproject.com and you can probably find out what to do with that. And so with that, thanks again, Kris, for coming on. Don't leave the studio. I'm going to follow up with you, but we're going to end the broadcast. If I can figure out exactly how to do this, again, I'm the only one here. So let's see if we can do this, and you guys have a great night.